Okay. So yesterday, why is it like this? I don't like this. Sorry, hold on. Yesterday we did some work that helped us prepare for today. So yesterday we practiced calculating the slope between 2 points on a line, and then we practiced graphing those lines. And so that was so that we could do the skills today of writing equations of parallel and perpendicular lines. So starting off here with two theorems. The first one says that the slopes of, the first one is about the slopes of parallel lines. And two lines are parallel if and only if they have the same slope. So parallel lines have the same slope. Okay, so any lines where the slope of one line is the same as the slope of the other will be parallel. They will never touch. Horizontal lines have a slope of 0, but they would both have a slope of 0, so they're parallel. Vertical lines have an undefined slope, but if you have any two lines that their slope is undefined, they're going to be parallel. So any two vertical lines are parallel. Okay, and then for perpendicular lines, so two lines are perpendicular, which remember means that they cross and they intersect at 90 degrees. Two lines are perpendicular if and only if their slopes, the product of their slopes, there should be an E there, the product of their slopes is -1, which means when you multiply the slopes together, you get -1. Okay? And we'll look at what that means a little bit more down here. So parallel lines, as we said up here, have the same slope. So if one of my lines has a slope of 2/3, the parallel line also has a slope of 2/3, but they have different y-intercepts. So in y equals mx plus b, the slope, the m value is the same, but the b value is different. Perpendicular lines have slopes that are negative reciprocals. Okay, negative reciprocals are two fractions that when they're multiplied together, they equal -1. I like to think of it more in terms of a flip and a switch. And what I mean by that is, like, if you have a slope of 2/3, okay, then the negative reciprocal to 2/3 is if I flip it. So instead of 2/3, I say 3/2. And since this one was positive, this one's negative. So slopes are perpendicular if the fraction is flipped and if one's positive and one's negative. And we're going to look at finding that as well. All horizontal lines are parallel to each other. So like I said, they all have a slope of 0, so they're all parallel. All vertical lines are perpendicular to each other. I'm using that symbol for perpendicular that we looked at before. So why did I write that? That's not true. Sorry. They're parallel. All vertical lines are parallel. They all have an undefined slope. Horizontal and vertical lines are perpendicular to each other. So a vertical line and a horizontal line are going to cross at 90 degrees. I'm just going to draw some examples of these horizontal and vertical lines. I'm going to draw a vertical line over here, A. You don't necessarily have to draw it in exactly the same space as me. Just draw a vertical line. And then I'm going to draw another one over here, B. So since those are both vertical lines, A is parallel to B. Okay, and then I'm going to draw two horizontal lines. Again, you don't have to draw them in exactly the same spot as me. This is just an example to have. So I'm going to draw a horizontal line C. and a horizontal line D. Since these are both horizontal, C is parallel to D. Okay, and then horizontal and vertical lines are perpendicular to each other. So this vertical line A is perpendicular to these two horizontal lines. So A is perpendicular to C, and A is perpendicular to D. So horizontal and vertical lines are perpendicular. The same is true for this vertical line B. It's perpendicular to D, and B is perpendicular to C. Okay, so example 1 says determine which of the lines are parallel and which of the lines are perpendicular. Okay, so I've got 4 lines here, A, B, C, and D. If any of the lines are parallel, they're going to have the same slope. So we just said up here, parallel lines have the same slope. So I'll know if they're parallel if they have the same slope. If any of the lines are perpendicular, they'll have a slope that is a negative reciprocal, which means the fraction is flipped, one's positive and one's negative. So since I want to know if my slopes are the same or if they're negative reciprocals, I'm going to find the slope of all 4 of these lines so that I can test if they're the same or if they're negative reciprocals. Okay, so I know that your guys' packets didn't print in color, so it might be a little bit more difficult to see. But starting here with line A is right here, and there are 2 points on this line A. There's this point, -3, 2, and this point, 0, 3. And we're going to find the slope, so I'm going to label one x1, y1, the other x2, y2. Just as I did in the warm-up, I'm going to calculate the slope. So I'm going to have y2, which is 3, minus y1, which is 2, over x2, which is 0, minus x1, which is -3. 3 minus 2 is 1. 0 minus -3 means 0 plus 3, which is 3. So the slope of line A is 1/3. Okay, next I'm going to do the same for line B. Line B is right here. These are the 2 points I have. I have the point 2, 0 and the point 0, -1. And I'm going to call one x1, y1, the other x2, y2. My slope will be y2, which is -1, minus y1, which is 0, over x2, which is 0, minus x1, which is 2. And that will be equal to -1 minus 0 will just be -1. 0 minus 2 is -2. Just like on the warm-up today, when you have a negative divided by a negative, make sure you change that to a positive. Please stop me if you have a question. Okay, next is line C down here. I've got these 2 points for line C. So I've got -1, -5, and 1, -4. I'm going to label one x1, y1, the other x2, y2. Plug them in. y2, which is -4, minus y1, which is -5, over x2, which is 1, minus x1, which is -1, equals -4 minus -5. Subtracting a negative turns to adding. So -4 plus 5 is 1. 1 minus -2, same thing here. It turns to adding. 1 plus 1 is 2. So that line also has a slope of 1/2. And then I've got line D, which is right here. Line D has these 2 points on it. So I've got -3, 2, and -2, 0. Label it x1, y1, x2, y2. My slope is y2, which is 0, minus y1, which is 2, over x2, which is negative 2, minus x1, which is negative 1, negative 3. 0 minus 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 minus negative 3 turns into adding. Negative 2 plus 3 is 1. Okay, so now I've calculated the slope of all 4 lines. I'm looking for parallel lines. Parallel lines are going to have the same slope. So which lines here have the same slope? B and C. Yes, thank you. So B has a slope of 1/2. C has a slope of 1/2. So line B is parallel to line C because they have the same slope. Okay, next I'm looking for lines that are perpendicular, which means I'm looking for slopes that are negative reciprocals. Negative reciprocals means the fraction is flipped. One slope is positive, one slope is negative. So do you see any lines, and it will be a pair of lines, where the fraction got flipped and one's positive and one's negative? So Brooke says line D and line B. I agree. And B and C. So this is 1 over 2. This got flipped to 2 over 1. This is positive. This is negative. So line B is perpendicular to line D. Since C has the same slope as B, then they're both perpendicular. So line C is also perpendicular to line D. Any questions? Awesome. Okay, well, on the other side then, there's an opportunity for you to practice. I don't want to give you too much time before I go over it, but I'm going to give you like 90 seconds to try this one. So you're deciding whether the lines are parallel, which means they have the same slope, perpendicular, negative reciprocal slope, fraction is flipped, and the sign is changed, or neither if it's none of those things. I'm going to give you literally 90 seconds to practice that, and then I will go over it. Okay, that might have been a little bit quicker, but hopefully you got at least one of the lines done. So I set it up to calculate my slope with x1, y1, x2, y2. So the slope for line 1 will be y2, which is 2, minus y1, which is 0, over x2, which is negative 2, minus x1, which is 2. 2 minus 0 is 2. Negative 2 minus 2 is negative 4. Here you can reduce your fraction, and every time you can reduce, you need 2. So this reduces because 2 goes into both of these numbers. 2 goes into 2 one time. 2 goes into negative 4 negative 2 times. So the slope there is 1 over negative 2. Here we go for this one. Calculating the slope, I'm going to have y2, which is 4, minus y1, which is negative 2, over x2, which is 4, minus x1, which is 1. This is going to turn into subtracting a negative, which is adding. So 4 plus 2 is 6. 4 minus 1 is 3. I can reduce this as well. You might be tempted to just say 2, but we like to keep slopes as a fraction. So if it reduces down to something like 2, put it over 1. so that it is a fraction. So then looking at the slopes that I calculated, are those lines parallel, perpendicular, or neither? If I've got a slope of 1 over negative 2 and 2 over 1, parallel, perpendicular, or neither? Yes, Ainsley, they are perpendicular. Thank you, Scott. Yep. So the fraction got flipped from 1 over 2 to 2 over 1. This is negative. This is positive. So these are perpendicular. Okay. Any questions? Okay, so then here we're going to do some practice actually writing equations of parallel and perpendicular lines. To solve for the equation of parallel lines. So if I'm given one line and I want to find a line that is parallel to that line, I'm going to borrow the slope from the first line and use it for m in my new line. And the reason I'm just going to take it from my old line and use it in my new one is because parallel lines have the same slope. So I'm not going to change the slope. I'm just going to use it from my old line to my new line. So it says write an equation of the line passing through the point. P is 3, negative 2. That is parallel to the line y equals 2/3 x minus 1. And then I'm going to graph both my lines. First, I'm just going to graph this. This is what we were practicing yesterday. Your y-intercept is negative 1. So you're going to start here on the y-axis at negative 1. Your slope is 2 over 3. So you move using your slope, which means you go up 2 to the right 3, up 2 to the right 3. So this is your original line. Okay, and you're going to find a line that's parallel to this through this point. So I'm going to put this point on my graph as well. The point 3, negative 2 is right here. That's that point P. Okay, so I want to figure out, I can tell that there would be a line that goes through like this that's parallel, but I want to figure out the equation. So I'm going to borrow my slope from this line, but I'm going to find a new y-intercept. So the slope of this line is right here. It's 2/3. Okay, so m is 2/3. I'm going to borrow that slope for my new line. Remember that we write lines like y equals mx plus b. Okay, this point that it gave me over here is an x and a y point. So what I just need to do is figure out for my new line, because I know m is going to be 2/3, I just don't know what b is. So what I'm going to do is plug in all of this information so that I can solve for b, and then I'll have my new line. So y is negative 2. I'm going to plug that in right there. That's equal to m is 2/3. So I'm going to plug that in there. X is 3. And I don't know b, that's what I want to find. Okay? So then I'm just going to simplify this to solve for b. So I'm going to have negative 2 equals, if you don't like multiplying whole numbers and fractions, just put this over 1 to make it a fraction, because then you multiply the numerators. 2 times 3 is 6. You multiply the denominators. 3 times 1 is 3 plus b. And you have negative 2 equals 6 divided by 3 is 2 plus b. To get b by itself, subtract 2. Negative 2 minus 2 means b is negative 4. Now that information I needed, but that's not the answer because I'm looking for the equation of my new line. But now I know my new line has a slope of 2/3, b is negative 4. So my new line is y equals 2/3 x minus 4. Okay, and I am going to graph that, but before I do, are there any questions about how I got that new equation? Okay, so then graphing it, your y-intercept is -4. So on your y-axis, start at -4. Your slope is 2/3, which means you go up 2 to the right 3. And then this is your new line that's parallel to your other line through that point P. Any questions on that? Okay, if you don't have any questions, I want you to try this next one. I'm only going to give you 2 minutes. It might seem fast, but I want to make sure you have time to work. So try this one right here. It's the same as this for 2 minutes, and then I'll go over it. Okay, I'm going to go over it. You might not have completely finished it, but just follow along with what you did do. Okay, so you're writing the equation of the line passing through the point P at -1, 1 that's parallel to y equals 2x minus 3. The first thing I want to do is graph my original line. My y-intercept is right here at -3. My slope is 2. I don't like it when it's not a fraction, so I'm going to make it a fraction by putting it over 1 so that it's easier for me to graph. Because that means I go up 2 to the right 1, up 2 to the right 1. So this is my original line. And then I have that point P at -1, 1. Okay, so I need to borrow the slope from my original line and use it to find the slope of my new line. So what is the slope that I'm going to borrow for my new line? Not 1. 1 is my y value from this point, which I will need to use in y equals mx plus b. But yes, you guys, thank you. My new slope that I'm going to borrow is going to be the same as this slope over here, which was 2 over 1. This is my xy point, so I'm going to plug in x, y, and m into this equation here so that I can solve for b. So I'm going to have y is 1. That's going to be equal to, I can just say 2. If you want to put 2 over 1, you can. Times x, which is -1, plus b. So I'm going to have 1 equals 2 times -1 is -2 plus b. add 2 to both sides. 1 plus 2 makes b 3. So now I know that b is 3, my slope is 2. I'm not done because I'm supposed to write my equation of my new line. So now that I found b, what is the equation of my new line? Y equals 2x plus 3. Yes, thank you, Brooke. So she took the slope from my old line, my new b. That's my new equation. Graphing this, my y-intercept is 3, which is here. My slope is 2 over 1, or 2. So I'm going to go up 2 to the right 1. And this is my new line that is parallel to my original line. I can draw really straight lines clearly. Are there any questions on that before we move to our last example? Okay. So last example then is we're writing the equations of perpendicular lines instead of parallel lines. So to write the equations for perpendicular lines, you're going to borrow and change the slope from the first line and use it for your new line. So because perpendicular lines have slopes that are negative reciprocals, I can't just use the same slope. I have to change it to make it a negative reciprocal. So I'm going to flip the fraction of my old slope, and I'm going to change the sign. So if my old slope was positive, my new slope will be negative. Or if my old slope was negative, my new slope is positive. Okay, so this example says write an equation of the line passing through the point negative 2, 2 that is perpendicular to y equals 2x plus 3. So first I'm going to draw my original line. Y equals 2x plus 3 is actually the line we just drew on the other side. So my y-intercept is 3. My slope is 2. It's not a fraction, so I'm going to make it a fraction by putting it over 1. So then I go up 2 to the right 1, up 2 to the right 1. And this is my original line. Okay, and then my new point P is negative 2, 2. So that's my point P that I'm going to draw the line perpendicular to the other line through that point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the slope from this line, which was 2 over 1. So m of my original line was 2 over 1. So my new slope, I'm going to flip the fraction. So instead of 2 over 1, I'm going to put 1 over 2. This was a positive slope, so my new one, I'm going to make negative. Okay, so for perpendicular lines, flip the fraction and change the sign. And then this is an xy point, and I'm going to do the same thing as before with y equals mx plus b, where I plug in these 3 numbers to figure out what b is. So plugging in here then, y is 2 is equal to m, which is negative 1/2, and then x is negative 2 plus b. Okay, so then 2 equals, if you don't want to multiply a fraction by a whole number, put this over 1, multiply the numerators. Negative 1 times negative 2 is positive 2. 2 times 1 is 2, plus b. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Subtract 1 to get b by itself. 2 minus 1 is 1. So b is 1. My new slope is negative 1/2. So then my new equation is y equals negative 1/2 x plus 1. And then I'm going to graph that line as well. So my y-intercept is positive 1. My slope is negative 1 over 2. And since it's negative, that means I go down 1 to the right 2. And then it goes through this line P. So I'm going to have this line here. And these 2 lines are perpendicular, so they cross at 90 degrees. Any questions on that one? Okay, then I'm going to do the same thing and give you 2 minutes to try this one, and then I will go over it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go over it. So write an equation of the line passing through the point 2, 3 that's perpendicular to negative 2x plus 2. So starting with graphing my original line, my y-intercept is 2. My slope isn't a fraction, so I want to make it one by putting it over 1. So then I'm going to go down 2 to the right 1, down 2 to the right 1. So here's my original line. And then I have my point P, which is at the point 2, 3. That's my point P. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I look at my old slope. My old slope is right here. It's negative 2 over 1. So my new slope is what? One half. Thank you. Yep, 1 over 2. So flip it instead of 2 over 1, flip it to 1 over 2. Since this one was negative, your new slope is positive. P has your point xy that you're going to use in y equals mx plus b. Plugging in these 3 values to solve for b. So you're going to have y is 3 is equal to m, which is 1/2. X is 2 plus b. Then you have 3 equals 1/2 times 2 is 1 plus b. Subtract 1. 3 minus 1 is 2 equals b. So now you have 2. That's not your answer. You should have a y equals. What is your new equation then that's perpendicular to the original? Y equals 1/2 x plus 2. Thank you, Brooke. Yep. Thank you, Scott. Yes. So my new slope was 1/2. My new b is 2. So this is my new equation. So then I'm going to graph that. My y-intercept is 2. My slope is 1/2. So I go up 1 over 2. So this is my new line that goes through the point P. Those meet at 90 degrees. Any questions on that example there?